Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something we all navigate every single day, often without even realizing it. We're looking at the anatomy of silence, and specifically the clinical reality of power. So settle in because we're going to completely deconstruct the exact mechanics of how social hierarchies are truly established. So let me ask you a question. Who really controls the room? I mean, think about your immediate gut instinct. We usually just assume it's the person holding court, right? The one completely dominating the conversation. We have this pervasive, almost anxious instinct that speaking automatically equates to dominance. But as we're going to see today, that assumption is deeply flawed. There's a saying that the world is drowning in noise, and most people are desperate to add to it. But why do we do that? Well, honestly, it's because people are terrified of the void. We over-explain ourselves because we are terrified of being misunderstood. We chatter endlessly to fill the air because we're just desperate to be seen. People chatter because they believe this huge societal myth. They actually believe that the person who talks the most controls the room. And they are completely wrong. In the clinical reality of power, you need to think of your words in purely economic terms. Words are a form of inflation. Literally, the more of them you produce, the less value each individual word actually holds. Think about it this way. When you speak too much, you aren't actually communicating anymore. You're leaking. You are actively hemorrhaging your most valuable psychological assets. You're leaking your hidden intentions, your deep-seated insecurities, and what we call your metabolic gold.
Section 1. Building a predictable cage.
Just observe the lower status individual in any given room or hierarchy. They're absolutely always the very first to jump in and fill an awkward silence. They're using filler words, nervous laughter, and totally unnecessary explanations just to soothe their own anxiety. They mistakenly believe that by talking, they're building a bridge to the other person. But in reality, they're building a cage. They are literally handing over the exact data others need to categorize them, judge them, and ultimately just dismiss them. By speaking without a precise purpose, you become highly predictable. And let's be real, in the complex game of status, predictability is a death sentence. Section 2. The strategic wall. We really need to redefine silence here. Silence is not just the empty absence of noise. It is a strategic wall. You've been taught your whole life that communication is all about what you say. But it's time to learn that true power is fundamentally about what you choose to withhold. When you actively refuse to fill that vacuum, you force the other party to crash right into that wall. You force them to reveal their hand, to stumble over their own words, and to completely surrender their frame of reality to you. This is the absolute ascension to mastering the room. You have to transition from being the anxious participant, the one just uttering syllables to relieve internal pressure, to becoming the silent observer. Because human nature absolutely hates a vacuum. By intentionally withholding your reaction, you're creating massive psychological pressure. The other person is essentially forced to fill that vacuum with their own insecurities and sudden concessions. Section 3. Mastering the tactical pause. Okay, the next time you're in a tense conversation, I want you to try this exact technique. When they speak, do not respond immediately. Instead, just count to 4 in your head. Let's actually try it right now together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now watch them struggle. Did you feel that? The exact psychological weight of what happens in just those 4 seconds is incredibly powerful. That kind of silence is not empty. It is incredibly heavy. It signals this calm, detached superiority and proves that you aren't reactive. As you watch their eyes start to dart around, watching them scramble to find more words to justify themselves, their complete discomfort suddenly transforms into your ultimate leverage. And you want to combine that heavy silence with a calm, unblinking gaze, the neutral stare. What this does is violently strip away all the normal social cues the other person relies on to read your mind. And when they can't read you, they actually begin to fear you. They'll naturally start throwing out more information, offering better deals, and showing deeper respect just to break that agonizing tension you've built up. You are basically making them defend their position against a brick wall of silence. Section 4. The ultimate power filter. Silence acts as this ultimate filter that immediately separates the wise from the weak. It instantly categorizes the people in your presence into 2 distinct groups. First, your equals. These are those extremely rare individuals who can just sit in that heavy silence with you without flinching. And second, your subjects. These are the people who frantically scramble and leak their metabolic gold just to fill up the void. Because ultimately, the throne isn't won by the person who screams the loudest. It's won by the one who listens until the room completely belongs to them. So it's really time to stop trying to win arguments with louder words and start winning them with a total clinical absence of noise. So based on who scrambles to fill the silence and who can actually sit with you in the quiet, ask yourself, who truly belongs to your room? Step back into your world today not as a panicked participant desperate to add to the noise, but as the silent observer. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking a really fascinating look at something we literally encounter every single day, but we almost never think about strategically. I'm talking about silence. If you've ever felt like you're just another participant in a noisy room, fighting just to get a word in, well, this explainer is going to completely flip your perspective. Because to master the anatomy of silence is to master the room without uttering a single syllable. It's the ultimate ascension, really, from being just a participant to being the observer. Okay, let's dive into this. The world is drowning in noise, and most people are desperate to add to it. The text points out a really subtle secret about human nature here. People speak primarily because they're absolutely terrified of the void. They constantly explain themselves because they're so afraid of being misunderstood. There's this widespread, totally false belief out there that the person talking the most is the one who ultimately controls the room. But as you'll see, that desperation to fill the silence, it's actually giving away your power. Think about your words like currency. This brilliant concept of words as inflation tells us that in the clinical reality of power, the more words you produce, the less each one is actually worth. It's just basic economics, right? When you overtalk, you are actively devaluing your own message. You might think you're communicating, but our source text argues that you're actually doing something else entirely. You are leaking. You're leaking incredibly valuable information about yourself. Section 1. The leaky vessel. The trap of over-explaining. Let's see how this builds. To really get this, just observe how people behave in social hierarchies. What exactly do lower status individuals do when the conversation suddenly stops? They are always the first to jump in and fill the silence. Think about your own habits for a second. Or, the last time you were in a dead quiet elevator. When you rush to fill that quiet space, you are leaking your intentions, your insecurities, and what the source famously calls your metabolic gold. We use filler words, unnecessary explanations, or do that little nervous laugh just to soothe our own anxiety. We do it because we believe we're building a bridge to the other person. But I really have to warn you here. According to the text, you aren't building a bridge at all. You are building a cage of predictability. So on one side, we have the talker, who is busy building that cage. By constantly speaking, the anxious talker is literally handing over the exact data that others need to categorize them, judge them, and eventually dismiss them. On the other side, we have the observer. The observer builds a wall by stepping back and choosing a detached stance. The observer uses the act of withholding to completely command the room. So the crucial point is this. In the game of status, predictability is a death sentence. Speaking without a clear strategic purpose strips away every single ounce of your leverage. When you're predictable, you are easy to outmaneuver. By over-explaining, you've essentially given away the very mystery and weight that makes people pay attention to you in the first place. Section 2. The anatomy of silence, a paradigm shift. We really need to completely redefine what it means when nobody is talking. Silence isn't just the absence of noise, not at all. It is a strategic wall and a form of intense psychological pressure. You see, human nature absolutely abhors a vacuum. We despise empty space in a conversation. By staying silent, you force the other person to fill that vacuum for you. And in doing so, they end up stumbling over their own words and ultimately surrendering their frame of the conversation right over to you. Power is about what you choose to withhold. We've been taught our whole lives that communication is entirely about what we say, right? But the ascension from being a participant to being the observer happens when you realize the exact opposite is true. When you intentionally withhold your reaction, you create a psychological pressure that most people simply cannot endure. By staying silent, you force them to fill that vacuum with their own insecurity, their secrets, and their concessions. Section 3. Weapons of quiet. Actionable tactics. All right, the first technique here is the tactical pause. In a negotiation or a confrontation, right after the other person speaks, do not respond immediately. Count to 4 in your mind. 1, 2, 3, 4. This silence is not empty. It is heavy. It signals that you are not reactive, that you're processing their words from a position of detached superiority. And this brilliantly illustrates the core dynamic. Just watch their eyes. Watch them struggle to find more words to try and justify themselves. Their discomfort is your leverage. The second technique is the neutral stare. Combine your silence with a calm, unblinking gaze. What this does is remove the social cues they usually rely on to read your mind. And when they cannot read you, they begin to fear you. They will literally offer more information, better deals, and deeper respect just to break the tension you've created. You are no longer defending your position, you are making them defend theirs against your silence. It gives you immediate, palpable power in the room. Section 4. The ultimate filter. Ascending to the throne room. Now, what's really interesting about this is how silence acts as the ultimate filter. It separates the wise from the weak. Those who can sit in silence with you without flinching, those are your equals. But those who scramble to fill it, they are your subjects. So here is your core takeaway. Stop trying to win arguments with louder words. Start winning them with a total absence of noise. The throne is not won by the person who screams the loudest, but by the one who listens until the room belongs to them. Which leaves us with one final, very important question to ask ourselves as we wrap up today. Are you screaming for the throne or listening until the room is yours? Just think about that the next time you feel the urge to fill the quiet. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning and stay focused.